Why do so many breakthrough technologies never become successful products? If you've ever worked in R&D, startups, corporate innovation, or deep tech, you've probably seen this happen. Often, the issue isn't the idea itself, it's maturity. Today, we'll be talking about technology readiness levels, where they came from, why they matter, and why understanding them might be the difference between a prototype and a viable product. We have our business development manager, Jack Fitzpatrick, with us today. Afternoon, Jack.
Afternoon.
We use technology readiness levels, or TRLs as they're known, as part of our product development process here at Medtechtomarket. So can you tell us what they are and why they're important, please?
Yeah, so TRLs are essentially a framework to ensure that a product is developed with the end goal in mind. And so there's 9 TRLs and they're broken into 3 distinct stages. So stage 1 is sort of the research and development, proof of concept. The middle stage is then validating that technology within a sort of regulated environment in a lab. And then the third stage is actually demonstrating that technology in a real world application to prove that it actually does what it says and it's been developed properly.
So it's a risk management tool, essentially, then?
So it's essentially a way of sort of de-risking technologies or understanding how de-risked they are. So TRL 1 to 3, it's sort of early stage science. It's not really become a product at that point, or it's not really been demonstrated in a productized form. TRL 9, essentially, that's ready to be on the market, ready to be sold and regulated. So
in TRLs 1 to 3, or the early stages, the uncertainty and the risk is massively greater than at the final stages.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So what we tend to see is, TRLs 1 to 3, that's a high risk technology where there's still many areas that it could go wrong. So the appetite for adopting those technologies can be quite low because especially large corporations at this point, they see that as a liability really, whereas TRL 9, it's sort of got everything but the sticker on it. It's ready to be on the market by whoever wants to adopt that technology.
Yeah. When I was doing my research, I found a phrase that seemed to fit this situation. That's innovation loves a good demo. So I presume that's where somebody's had an idea. Technically, it might work, or it has worked once, twice, whatever. But it works isn't really the same in product development as something that is constant in the real world environment and almost perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of consistency and repeatability are a key factor of that. So, something might have been demonstrated in the lab, but can you convert that into a product which every single version of that product has to work the exact same? You can't have one of them failing or one of them overestimating something, underestimating something. And so TRLs are really about progressing through that from that early stage. The science works to now we've got a product and that works and it's safe and effective for use.
Right, okay. So you mentioned 3 stages before, but you can also cut it in half and say there's science and research and then more of a product development stage afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's sort of where we help out. It's that a lot of the science and research may have already been done on some of the projects we work at, especially the university projects. But we then take that science, which is robust, and productize it. And, that comes with its own challenges, really. So.
And you said it's a framework. I presume it's across the board, used by everybody. Is it a case of if you don't pass the requirements at stage 1, you don't get to stage 2? Or is that a mistake that a lot of people make where they skip ahead a few or they jump ahead?
Following the TRLs religiously, a lot of people struggle with, and people have a tendency to maybe skip ahead or believe they've breached a certain TRL. But if you've missed out any of those levels, you're actually back at that. You can't go to TRL 7 if you've not done 3. That kind of thing. So some people might believe they're further ahead than they are if they've not been following them methodically. So.
Right, okay. So you can see quite easily how things go wrong and something might be, the feasibility test might have been fine and then it doesn't actually make sense in the real world. You can see how easily that could happen if stages haven't been followed properly.
Yeah, exactly. And so actually a key issue we sometimes see is people might carry out clinical studies based on a technology. So if a technology hasn't been productized and it hasn't been through manufacturing validation, any clinical work done on that is then not valid for a technical file submission for regulatory bodies. So we sometimes get people thinking they're at a certain stage because they've done clinical studies, but if that technology is still lab-based and not productized, then unfortunately they're further behind than they think.
Yeah. And I suppose that can have knock-on effects for investment and various other things, which I suppose we can touch on a bit later on when we go through the TRLs in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
I actually looked at some famous examples of this kind of thing where tests have been done, but actually it doesn't work in the real world. One of the earliest, or one of the more sort of mainstream examples I found was PVC piping. So they did the durability test. It worked just as well as copper, metal, whatever was used before. It was cheaper to make. It was sort of going to revolutionise the plumbing industry. But apparently the supply chain and the actual end users, the plumbers themselves, just didn't want to use it because they thought it sort of, it's like us saying AI is going to take our jobs. Back in the 1950s, the plumbers were like, well, this will make my job quicker and easier, so I can't charge as much. And so apparently it took 15 years for that to be adopted and to be accepted as useful in a real world working environment.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, we see a lot of that as well in diagnostics and medtech, where things work really well in the lab, but getting them into practice is a whole different beast. Sorry.
So you've got different examples where something that's not been considered in the lab stages, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, really, aren't there?
Definitely, and yeah, I think it is, it's used globally in all industries, but I think especially in regulated industries like medtech and diagnostics, there's also that layer of you can go on TRLs and think you're really close, and the regulators can turn around and say you're missing this key bit of information that you should have done back at TRL 3, and you've got to go back and do it. So it's definitely important in our industry as well.
Well, that's it. Depending on what you are creating, there's a sort of a necessity for safety or otherwise, which brings me nicely onto the origins of the TRLs.
Yeah, I think I heard it was NASA, was it, that came up with them?
It was indeed. Quiz points for Jack. Yeah, I mean, similar to medical diagnostics, if you get it wrong with a NASA piece of equipment, whatever it may be, the consequences are mission failure, loss of life, billions of dollars. So in our industry as well, it's almost equally as important that we get it right. You can't just sort of gloss over a few of them, can you?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So you can imagine, yes, space travel again, highly complex and sort of, well, regulated for safety. So yeah, glad that trickled down to other industries.
So you mentioned earlier, Jack, that there are 9 TRLs in product development, or diagnostics development in our case. So what we're talking about here is sort of product maturity, isn't it? It's how ready it is to go to market. So if we start right at the beginning then at TRL 1, what does that look like? Yeah,
so TRL 1 is essentially the basic scientific concepts of that idea or product have been observed. So it's a feasible option, and then TRL 2 sort of identifies an application for that first principle. So you sort of think where it might be used, what the product might look like, and you've got an idea. It's sort of coming together. And then TRL 3 is actually some form of data to back up that idea. So you've got early proof of concept, feasibility, and this can be quite basic, and doesn't have to be necessarily on the product. It could just be on the underlying technology.
Lovely. It's still very much sort of curiosity phase at this stage, though, isn't it? It's the technology's kind of fragile. It's still more of a concept than a product, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So obviously, then you move on to TRL 4 and 5. So with TRL 4, it's meant to be tested in sort of laboratory conditions, so not really reflecting the real world, but a controlled environment. And then TRL 5 is sort of a little bit closer to the real world setting. Obviously, in our industry, that would probably be a laboratory anyway, or similar. So some of the TRLs merge into each other a little bit. So then TRL 6 would be you've actually got quite a robust prototype operating in conditions that are as close to the real world as you can get whilst still being in a sort of laboratory-based environment. So you're not actually out in the real world, but you're as close as you can get to an artificial version of that, essentially.
And TRLs 4 to 6 are also known as the sort of valley of death in terms of development stages, where, as we've mentioned previously, the idea is great, it works in a lab, but something goes wrong. Why do you think that is at this stage of development? Is it because of a change of location? Is it because you tested more robustly, or you just do you need more data? What is it that makes it more difficult?
Essentially, getting proof of concept data and getting one experiment to work, or getting an indication something might work, that can be, I wouldn't never say simple, but that could be easier than the TRL 4 to 6 stages, getting that real kind of robust repeatability, and also trying to understand, if the variability is too great, then that's not a reliable diagnostic, for example, in our industry. And so it's really that next level of scientific scrutiny, and I think that's where things can get a bit more difficult, really.
And as we mentioned before, funding can get a bit hazy at this stage, can't it? Because investors want to make sure that it's going to get to market quickly and make loads of money, I presume. If it's not quite ready, they might be reluctant to start pumping money into it. So there's a lot of complexity.
Yeah, also I think one of the big problems with as you say, sort of maybe valley of death is that the early stages are well funded with academic grants and academic funding and sort of universities. And then the latter stages, when the technology is very reliable and there's good confidence in it, then obviously that's when investors or VCs would step in. And I think that mid stage is definitely there's less appetite for the blue sky academic funding, but there is no interest from VCs because it's still too risky. So unfortunately, no one's kind of willing to step in and carry things through that valley. And obviously, we help out, and then that's where we support people. But again, the funding, unfortunately, is still a bit sparse at the moment. So yeah, hopefully that's something that maybe a government could look into, sort of creating a setup for that, really.
So, a policy reform that perhaps we don't have time to go into that much detail on today's episode.
Unfortunately. So.
Yeah. Okay, so we're out of the difficult TRL stages 4 to 6. Is this when we start to get serious and have an actual product on our hands?
Yeah, absolutely. So, TRL 7 to 9, that's really sort of the product's kind of been developed, it's been, tested in a lab and people are confident it works, and then it's sending out into the real world. It works in a lab with someone with a pipette or whatever, but can that work in a clinic? Can it work at home use? Can it work with the intended user of that device rather than a trained scientist who's been doing experiments every day for the past month? And so, that's the critical stage to prove the real world effectiveness of that product, really.
But it's still testing at this stage, isn't it? And as we said before, risk management, as we get closer to stage 9, you're mitigating or eliminating all of that risk, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So stage 9 is effectively a fully de-risked product, and stage 7 to 8 is mostly de-risked and very, confident. There's good confidence in the product, but there's still that final bit of data that needs collecting.
We have heard quite an interesting analogy about TRLs. Do you want to explain how our founder, Matt Pearce, sort of describes how TRL should be approached?
His favourite analogy is actually, it's like baking a cake. So essentially, you can have all the ingredients to make a cake, but the order in which you combine those ingredients and the steps you take are fundamental to getting the end result of a tasty cake. If you add them all in at once, chuck everything in the oven and don't do anything, you're probably not going to get a very tasty cake. It's important the steps you take, and they must be done in an exact order, and that's very similar to TRLs.
So we mentioned that investors will start to get involved around the Valley of Death. Regulatory bodies might be involved at a similar stage. There are also kind of implications for internal team members, R&D teams, etc., aren't there? Because they won't be ready to push things forward until they're satisfied that their particular TRL is done properly, will they?
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's obviously where things like in regulated product development, we operate QMS, a quality management system. Although it's not directly aligned to TRLs, they are very closely aligned system in terms of we must ensure that certain conditions are met before we're able to move on to following milestones. And that's exactly how TRLs need to be approached. And that's why a lot of the work we do aligns to the TRL system. So we can take TRL or products from TRL1 through to TRL9, but actually most commonly people might come to us around TRL3, where the fundamental science has been proven and they've got the proof of concept data, but then they're ready to take it through regulated product development. And we're able to then take that and collaborate with them to take it to a market-ready product with full confidence that the data is there and the regulators have approved it. So,
sounds like quite a scary process for, an academic researcher that's just wants to do good in the world. So how do you convince them that getting involved or partnering up with Medtechtomarket is actually a good thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. So the thing is that some people can maybe think that, productization and it's all about making money, but actually it's also about things being safe and regulated. So, for example, the ISO 13485 quality management system, which is a requirement of IVDs and medtech devices, it's very, very strict, very stringent requirements. And if that was imposed on a university lab, they wouldn't be able to do any of their normal research because they'd be too busy calibrating every single pipette every day, etc. And so we help them get a regulated product onto the market so that bodies know it's safe and effective, which helps it get to the patients that need it the most. It's not just about selling a product to make money. It's about having a safe and effective product that does what it says and what it needs to help patients. So
like we said before, it's about technology maturity and mitigating risk rather than just getting something ready and selling it as fast as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's almost the opposite of selling it as fast as you can. That it takes quite a while, and some people would prefer to sell it faster. But it's important to go through the TRLs and as they align with regulations to ensure that everything is safe and effective, and you're not selling something that is actually endangering patients and not doing its job.
Yeah, good old NASA, they got it right, making sure it was all done properly.
Exactly.
Final thought then, you've mentioned that Medtechtomarket normally get involved after the academic research has been done. I suppose it could work the other way around, where someone's right near the end and might want just a little help over the precipice, so to speak. What's the preferred method for Medtechtomarket? To do the whole thing, or just to help out where we can?
Yeah, it's honestly both. So we're very flexible and we're happy to help projects at any stage, essentially. So although we can do the full project from TRL1, so people can come to us with a concept or an idea, and we could take that all the way through to TRL9 and market launch. We also help people. Some people have been through V&V, and then they may be looking for some regulatory help and manufacturing. So they've got the product approved, but they need manufacturing help, and we also offer services like that. So we help out wherever it's needed, essentially.
Great stuff. Well, I think we've covered a lot about the basic strategy or structure of TRLs today. So wherever you fit in the innovation ecosystem, the question isn't just, is it a good idea? It's how ready it is. Jack, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thanks for listening. If you found this useful, share it with someone that you know is building, funding, or scaling a new technology. And we'll see you next time.